All right, so we are recording. Thank you everyone for joining us for our third live webinar with Chef Steve Harden. My name is Rebecca Antill. I'm the Youth Services Consultant at the South Carolina State Library. And just a little bit of housekeeping. Please keep your mics muted unless you want to ask a question. Feel free to ask a question anytime you like. You can type into the chat box. This session is being recorded and it will be posted later on our YouTube playlist. If you need closed captioning, those are down at the bottom as well and available. And I think that's it for me. Chef, it's all you.
Fantastic. Good evening, good afternoon, everyone. As always, I am Chef Steve. Feel free to call me Chef Steve if you forget. Sorry, it's still going to be Chef Steve. And that, of course, is at the bottom of my screens. I have two videos, so two video logins. So our face-to-face here, face-to-camera, I guess, maybe, and my close-up. So the goal today is, of course, we're going to do a review, quick review, just basically skimming through those slides from what we did session 1 and session 2.
Ooh, will there be a test? I love tests.
There will be a quasi test. Open book, talk amongst yourselves. Yeah, there's definitely going to be kind of a follow along. What's my keyword here? What have I tested? Oh yeah, kind of most definitely. I'm gonna throw that out to you guys for some interactive. Ooh, there's a glare. I couldn't see it. So we're gonna go today. The goal: review anything and everything else we can think of to include, but we're also going to try to review interacting with your audience and kind of the differences that you may run into between presenting to adults versus presenting to kids, high school kids, children, okay, on how to maybe techniques of reading a room, maybe a little bit, as well as kind of a mental state to get yourself in if you get just a dead, tough room where you're kind of bombing, because that happens. So the demo and interaction today, we're going to bring the meal all together and still stick into the kind of that summer fall really, but I mean a caramel apple you can do any time of the year. I mean, they work for the summertime, but they also work at Christmas, to be honest. So, yeah, the chicken taco. That's a great question. Who made some of that wonderful chicken tacos from last year? So that's kind of our goal. Yeah, wide open conversation. Wendy, way to go.
They were delicious.
I have the ingredients, but I haven't made them yet.
My son said these are the best chicken tacos you've ever made. Why do you not make them like that all the time?
Well, what's the answer? What did you learn? This is great. This is actually great.
It was building the flavor.
Okay.
And taking the extra time. And I don't always, I mean, I use thighs on other recipes, but I don't always use thighs on the chicken tacos. And that had a richer flavor. And just taking the extra time to go through those other steps and everything with the toasting of the spices and that add in the chicken broth and everything. It just took it up to another level.
Fantastic. Thank you. That is the goal, and not just to quote back, necessarily what the words I use in the presentation, but see there's a wisdom there, if you will, a little, versus knowledge. Again, those of you, this is your first time, this is just the way it works. Live TV versus just memorization. So when you can apply it, and this will be for all techniques, things I talk about today when we get to interactive with your audience and whatnot. Yeah, really that leap between wisdom and knowledge. And as educators, educators / parents or both, big differences. So great. That's a really great. Did anybody make pico a couple weeks ago, or have potentially made the pico since? That's okay if you haven't, but yeah, I'm gonna go over some of those knife skills. Really, that's gonna be kind of a terminology, sort of vocab test, if you will, quiz wise, but very cool, very cool. So what do we call, forgive me, I don't actually know if I mentioned this or not. What do we call our setup and our prep? That French phrase. What do we call that? You may have just only used the word prep, but there is a French phrase. Yep. Exactly right, Jennifer. Yep, mise en place. Everything in its place, or everything in place is a literal translation, comes from Chef Auguste Escoffier. Cool, very cool, very cool. Let's see, how do we hold a knife? Do you guys remember that phrase? That's back from week 1. Correct, correct. How would you teach it? What do we call it in order to teach it? You literally can call it whatever you want, but it does have a name. Pinch, yep, that's your keyword to remember, pinch grip. Yep, pinch grip. And the fun one, the other hand. What does the other hand do? Yep. Yep, pinch and claw, or Toy Story or Addams Family or Thing or what, right, yep. Fingertips hold the food, knuckles guide the knife is another general phrase I use all the time. It's a little long though, but fingertips hold the food and then you use your knuckles to guide the knife. Very cool. When we boil out, I didn't make a specific point of this last week. I did say it though. When we boil out a liquid or sauce to thicken it, that's a process. It has a name. Yep, reduce. What are we reducing?
The liquid, the water.
There it is. Careful with liquid, because oil can be a liquid. You know, fat in a liquid state at room temperature, but it won't reduce. So you can boil it all day and you'll just burn your fingers. And it's not going to reduce the volume. So yeah, we're reducing volume by removing the water content. So it's splitting hairs a little bit, but it is a valuable piece of knowledge that you, if it's all fat that you've rendered out and you're trying to thicken it, it's not going to happen because it's all the water's gone. So very cool, very cool. So then we did. What did we do? What did I do to those herbs, to the seasoning that I said would even work if you just dumped the McCormick taco seasoning? Which, Wendy, did you make your own or did you use the packet?
So I used the packet
Oh,
only because I was running out of time. Sorry.
That's fine. That's why when you have time, you make a batch and then keep it. The beauty of making your own and is you get to eliminate all those really long chemistry class words that may or may not need to be in there. So, yep, we toasted them, and I like that you got that, Jennifer, because we didn't use a toaster, we didn't use an oven, we didn't. Okay, we're still toasting, even though it's just in a pan. Cool. All right, I dig it. What's the most important thing in the kitchen?
the coffee.
The coffee. Cool. Yep. All right. So
Well,
we're
I don't know.
all,
I like Jennifer's answer. Jennifer says wine.
that. Fair enough. So you do the knives first while you're cutting before the wine. That's yeah. Awesome. Okay, so let's dive in. Let's dive in. So I'm going to hijack the presentation here, and we're going to review those slides. Ooh, do you guys remember what we call it when we catch something on fire on purpose? Flambe. And that's not just a dish name, that is a technique. So you flambe the alcohol out of there. There's Mr. Chef of kings, king of chefs, Chef Auguste Escoffier, credited with establishing the standards for our mother sauces, the Brigade System, mise en place. So the brigade is the name, is your team. The brigade is the people. The stations are where they work. So that's just some vocabulary for you. So if you have a brigade, that's your kitchen staff.
Chef, did you go over the mother sauces in the first one? Will you list them again?
I didn't actually. I don't remember doing it, but yeah, of course. So since we have all adults here, we're gonna have a tiny little bit of fun with it. So there is a mnemonic of how to remember your mother sauces, and it's Beth has VD. So nobody's Beth here. We don't have any Beths, right? Okay, good. Whew, I probably should have checked. So bechamel, espagnole, tomato, hollandaise, velouté. And then a half mother, half derivative or daughter sauce that sometimes gets included in these lists, not Escoffier's Prime 5, but it's used this way, is demi-glace. And so that's half espagnole and half brown stock reduced by half.
Interesting.
Is what a demi-glace is. But the
I
classic
didn't realize
five that are
demi-glace
in his book.
was a sauce.
Yeah, and that's why people kind of argue on it, because you're just thinning it out.
Right.
So to make espagnole, you need brown stock, typically beef. So we then add more to it, and then we reduce it to where it's thicker, and now it becomes demi-glace. So halfway to glace, meaning essentially if you've ever had a bouillon cube, or you've had that jar of better than bouillon, that's called base, chicken base, vegetable base. So that's your stock base, which all that is reduced stock all the way down to not be completely dried out. If you completely dry it out, then you get the bouillon cubes, and then they got to do some more science to squish them into the mold like a McRib, and there you got your bouillon cube. Like that little dig I threw on the McRib. All right, so glace, I don't know the literal translation, but you have your better than bouillon or your stock base, which is known as a glace. And so we get halfway there, demi-glace. So that's where that comes from. So it's just an espagnole sauce with thinned out and then reduced. But Beth has VD, BETHVD, is how they taught me in culinary school. Swear to God, true story. Or you can come up with your own, but I might have just poisoned your brains, and that's all you'll be able to think about now is that one. But it's bechamel, espagnole, tomato, hollandaise, velouté, and then maybe demi-glace. So, and if you've never had velouté, you actually have if you've ever had a chicken pot pie, because that's what velouté tastes like, is the guts of a chicken pot pie. Assuming it's a chicken velouté. Classically, it was done with veal and fish, but in the more modern velouté, it's a chicken. It's the thickened up chicken stock. And it tastes exactly like chicken pot pie. And then we go do other things to it. So mise en place, he got that from his military service. So kitchens were different when he was coming up at 13 years old. Then he goes in the military, his mandatory service, and steals stuff like the Brigade System, like getting all your prep, your hurry up and wait kind of idea we had in the military. He steals those philosophies and applies them to the kitchen. So that's why it was so revolutionary. And then he wrote his book, Le Guide de Culinary, or Culinaire, or the cookbook, or the cook guide. I mean, if you want a translation, but 5,000 recipes in that. And it became the standard for French cooking. Knife safety. So even though I say have fun, have more fun, that doesn't discredit safety and sanitation. Those are responsibilities in the kitchen, in the demo, in the lab, in your classrooms, where that's responsibility. Everyone in there, the students equally with each other. And we, of course, as the leaders, and I'm tying this into week 3 as well, have more responsibility to be mentors, to be examples, to our students. And, you know, whether we ham it up and whatnot, on one hand, we have that ability to get serious when it's needed, especially with our younger students. Some of our older students too, sometimes we need a firm hand, right, honey? She's like, yep. So what, so knife safety, we demoed pico de gallo. So claw, pinch grip, okay? Down and forward is your power stroke. A slice is back. Down and forward or slice to pull back for the most part. And I showed you guys how to mince, which was just kind of the fun, make it a big mess, but where you lift the knife up and down, and it rocks back and forth. And then with practice. So that's your mince.
Now,
Last
Chef,
week. Yeah, go ahead.
I needed you to give me an example of how to cut a sweet potato, because I was trying to cut one yesterday. I was volunteering at the food bank, and it was part of one of the recipes that we were making. And cutting a sweet potato and dicing a sweet potato is like one of the hardest things to do.
Gotcha. So I have some advice, actually. So microwave it for about 2 minutes.
Oh,
It'll soften it up a little bit, just like you do with the squash, potentially.
interesting.
So give it a quick microwave, not enough to, you know, hot potato, but enough to maybe soften it a little bit, because they are super dense. Where were you finding the most difficulty? Was it wanting to roll on you? Were you not getting a?
I gave myself flat surfaces, so I cut off a couple edges so that I could lay it flat.
Okay.
But trying to slice it so that I could then do sticks and do dices. It was just.
Was the knife
either my
dragging?
cuts were too thick,
okay,
or it was like crumbling. I don't know. I think that perhaps my knife was not very sharp, but it's a commercial kitchen at the food bank. I would think they had sharp knives, but
knock wood. Yeah, you would think, unless it's just what they have, potentially just donated, and maybe they don't have the budget for a leasing service that many
I wouldn't
professional
have called it
kitchens
a
do
good knife. So
of rotating their knives
yeah,
week over week over week. That's a possibility. And maybe they were just donated. I almost said donated old knives, which again, if they're well maintained, taken care of, it doesn't matter how old the knife is. But maybe that could have been it. Are you comfortable with that down and forward idea? That's your power stroke, is pushing forward. Sweet potatoes are tough, definitely relative to a russet potato, because they are wicked dense. So yeah, the microwave.
Yeah, I like that idea.
Another possibility is a total change in technique is taking a larger knife. So you have two options here, potentially. Taking a larger chef's knife and setting it, finding your distance of what you want to do, and getting it in there, and everything is short and stable, but you're going to stay stable with the rest of your arm, and then you just give it a smack with the back of your hand to guillotine or cleave through. Assuming you squared it off first, like you said. You really don't want to try that with a round item, because then it kind of takes off and disappears on you. So that's another potential. So a really big knife, or a flatter knife like the Sentoku knife will also help, because this knife is designed more for up and down, even though you'll slightly move back to front.
Okay.
That's why this is a more rectangular shape, the Sentoku knife. And that has more to do with, think daikon radish, think larger, just in Asian cuisine. That's the main function of why this is like half knife, half cleaver. So the design functions that's next level knowledge stuff. But yeah, those are my two recommendations, and they're thinner. So putting all those together, that next time you do a sweet potato, I think you'll have more success.
Yeah, that definitely sounds easier.
I've even gone as far as get it stuck and then wham. So
I'm like,
I mean,
I'm trying to
that's
act
official
like I know what
culinary
I'm
school
doing here in
technique.
this kitchen with 4 other people, and it was really hard.
Oh no. Yeah, when you get that thing you're not expecting. That was one of the first, I think that was one of my first pieces of advice. But again, you can't, why do you think I say live TV? What are you going to do? I say that so often because you can't plan everything.
Exactly.
But yeah, that's a great question, and something that doesn't normally come up unless you have them right in front of you, to be honest. Yeah, square them off. It's a microwave, square them off, find your distance, and give them a good smack if you're really, really stuck. First and foremost, of course, is using that steel. And if they don't have a steel in that kitchen, I think that's a worthwhile donation.
There you go. Thank you.
Yeah. All right, great questions. So any other questions on the context from first week? Pico de gallo, safety techniques, or safety, techniques. Okay, so yeah. Yeah.
I was
Go ahead,
cutting.
Hello again.
I was cutting green onions last night, and I got a little bit of that green on my cutting board. What was I doing wrong with the technique? My knife may not have been sharp enough. I don't know.
All of the above. Green onion is different than green herbs, though.
Yeah.
In terms of our concern, the general vegetable fabrication, if you will, which is just the pretentious way to say cutting up vegetables, is not as much of a concern as if we're doing herbs for a raw presentation. Just to address that point. But to directly answer your question of what you were doing, quote unquote, wrong, 2 things: knife not sharp enough, and too much up and down pressure. So what you physically have done is exploded a bunch of plant cells that are full of liquid. So that's back to biology class, right? Plant cells, animal cells. Plant cells have hard outer walls and they're full of goo. Animal cells are just all goo. So when you compress them too much, you're exploding the cells. So ideally, any green, and I chive green onion is a little hard to do, but I mean, any green, leafy green, like for salad, ultimately you really want to tear it. But if you're doing salad for 50 people, no. So, because physically what happens is you actually unzip down to the cellular level when you tear the leaves and the greens. You're unzipping those cells from each other. When you use a knife, you are potentially pulverizing, that line of cells, and they leak and they bruise. So physically what's happened is water full of chlorophyll got into your board with green. Now, were those green onions going to be a garnish, or were they part of the dish to be cooked?
Part of the dish.
Yeah.
Don't worry about it.
Yeah, it's totally like a don't worry about it.
Yeah.
But now you know physically what's happening, and you want to apply that to your herbs. So it's really that difference between satisfied with execution of something at an 8, or do you want to execute it at a 10? Really, because it's a minute amount of flavor, but again, being able to show, especially in demo, being able to show, look, no green stain on my board, and then being able to explain it. So it's a little bit of a brush yourself off kind of, to be completely honest. I mean, it arguably is a minute amount of flavor that really doesn't make a difference. But if you're looking to impress with your skill, happy with an 8 or happy with a 10. So yeah. And even with the herbs, if you're going to throw them in a pot, who cares? They're going to cook down and disappear and pulverize anyway. But raw, fresh prep, yeah, that's that next level of execution. Great question.
Thank you.
What does cooking do? How do we cook? A couple different ways. cooking is the transference of energy to break down molecules, fats, proteins. We do a little more than break down protein, carbs, things like that. But we're denaturing protein. And denaturing of protein is what gives us a different color. So what we're left over affects light a different way, and that's why it changes color. That's why foods that are kind of translucent, think shrimp, think raw chicken, why they kind of get opaque when we cook them. But then when we brown them at a high enough temperature, then we get the Maillard reaction as well as caramelization, which is what we're going to do today, actually, in its purest form. Throw a bunch of heated sugar and it turns brown. Caramelized sugar. So how, pop quiz, how do we transfer heat? Now, this is with the exception of ceviche, which is denaturing of protein using an acid. So that's chemical denaturing of proteins. We're strictly talking about transference of, whoops, I forgot to go through these. Nice picture of pico. Can't claim that I make it though. It's just a cool picture. Transfer of heat. So there's three ways we transfer heat from point A to point B being our food. Can you ladies name one of the three? Or gentlemen, or all of the above? It's just the ladies are the ones that have the cameras on. So, sorry. What are one of the three ways? One of them is a type of oven. Oh, I forgot about the chat. Sorry, my bad. Convection. Yep, that's the one that's the, oh, geez, we got all the answers in the chat. I'm sorry. Forgot what I was doing. Oh, nice. Yeah, thanks, Rebecca, for typing those out. Yep, conduction, convection, exactly. Close, Jennifer. You are on the right track with the letter R. Radiant. Yep. Okay, I am going to mind you. I don't mind. Well, wait, I don't mind you. Never mind, we're going to move on. Yep, radiant or radiate, radiation. So radiant, conduction, convection. Radiant is the sun or that heat lamp in the bathroom at the hotel. I don't know anyone that has a heat lamp in their bathroom at home. They just, that they exist in hotels. And then convection, which is the fan in the oven, or blow dry your hair, same thing. Moving hot air is more efficient than just radiating hot air. And then conduction. So, Daddy, what does hot mean? And I say, touch that. And it's good. Ow, there we go. I can't take credit for that. I stole that from a comedian, but it was really funny when I saw it. So, the difference between mother parenting and father parenting. So, conduction, convection, radiant. Browning food, we're developing flavors. We're bringing layers to different things. Flavors that don't exist until we go through that Maillard reaction or through that caramelization of sugar. They both have to do with sugars, but Maillard also includes protein, and it's at a lower temperature. And then we talked, of course, about that safety zone. Oh, don't feel bad at all, you guys, because I asked that question. I asked to a class today that I asked to you guys of, does raw meat get you sick? Everybody in class was like, oh yeah, yeah.
Well, that's what we
No.
hear. That's the easy answer. Of course, raw meat makes you sick. Of course, raw
Unless
eggs
you
make you sick.
prepare it, unless you prepare it as a tartare or a carpaccio or a sashimi, magically it doesn't get you sick. So, right, and yeah, same thing. They had that oh wow moment when I said, no, it's contaminated raw meat that gets you sick. So back to our cross-contamination safety procedures. Farm to table aspect, knowing where your food comes from, trusting your local butcher, doing it yourself if you're a hunter. I mean, going all the way to say, a elk loin carpaccio. those kinds of things, proper storage. And so, yeah, it's not raw food, it's raw contaminated or undercooked contaminated food. That's the issue. So, and then of course we did the chicken tacos. Oh yeah, I forgot again, I had this graphic, radiant, okay, conduction, ouch, the hot handle, and then convection, which is also why lakes don't freeze all the way solid, if you're curious. Old biology class quiz in college. Plating techniques. Two, and we're going to really go over this today, 2 factors to plating that you need to focus on to bridge that gap between Waffle House and Shanahan Steakhouse or whatever, or Hell's Kitchen, you know, or what you see on any of Chef Ramsay's TV shows and stuff. Height and negative space. We design the food to touch. Your food touching on your plate is okay. We're not doing the old cafeteria tray or compartmented food and stuff like that. That's not what we do. The food is designed to touch. But let's break this down, super simple. So we have a pistachio brittle, which is just sugar boiled to the hard crack stage. And then you throw some peanuts at it, pour it out, in this case pistachios, pour it out on a mat, let it dry, cool off, and then you break off a piece. And all they did is, I'll turn my laser pointer on here. All they did is they just shoved it into the sorbet here. So we have 3 scoops of sorbet, a pistachio brittle that just got cracked off and then shoved into the sorbet. Got 1 in each of them here. This one's a little harder to see, but it's in all 3. We have a chocolate ganache, which is just chocolate and cream, but we call it ganache. And then we have this mystery garnish. I will say this because it's not the easiest picture to see. It is not gold. I do have students, when I ask them, what do you think this is? They'll say, is that gold? No, because gold leaf you would have.
Right?
Nope. Most likely not. I'll give you, there's a 1% chance that's toasted coconut. I will give you that. What is it most likely?
Finely chopped pistachios.
There it is. Yep. Typically, you guys will get nuts, peanuts, walnuts, pecan. There is a remote chance that that could be coconut because this could be a coconut sorbet, possibly. So that would apply. But what's the takeaway here? What's the theme? Use, if you're struggling for something for a garnish, use what's already in the dish. If that's
Don't introduce
maybe
any flavor.
Right. You can. It has to make sense though. It totally has to make sense. Introducing a new flavor is not wrong. It's not against the rules in any way, shape, or form, but it needs to fit. Let's say, for example, hot cocoa with a candy cane in it as a cool artistic garnish. Well, mint and hot cocoa were like peas and carrots. I mean, that's amazing. So that makes sense, right? But you wouldn't maybe put a Sour Patch gummy worm or something in there. I'm just making this randomly up the top of my head. So even though it looks cool and multicolored and all that, so it has to make sense if you're going to introduce a new flavor. But 9 times out of 10, it's a repurposed item from the dish itself in some way. You don't want to go putting raw on there. You do want to make it do something to it. Say French onion soup, for example, you're not going to drizzle raw onion on top. Maybe onion straws that have been deep fried, that could work. So it's most likely chopped pistachios, could be toasted coconut. So, but I mean, I can use all the chefy high-end vocabulary in the world to dissect this plate, or I could show you how simple it is and say, look, it's 3 scoops of sorbet, cracked off some pieces of brittle, shoved in, put some chocolate on it and throw nuts at it. Don't cover the whole plate. We call that negative space, sometimes known as white space, because typically we use white plates in our fine dining and high-end chefy stuff, right? But if it's a blue plate, then it would be called blue space. So if you want to get to the mathematics and the geometry of it in terms of visual art, 40% negative space. So 40% of the total area we have blank, we want to leave blank, is kind of the breakdown of this style of elegant plating, typically around 40%. An example of 0%, Denny's, Waffle House, okay? They just throw stuff on the plate because plating is not a visual, it doesn't apply to that business model. You don't go to Waffle House for elegant plating. You go because it's not appropriate to hop the counter and eat right off the grill. You need a delivery method to get the food from the grill to your table, because that's all they do, right? There is zero artistic input there. And then we did the chicken street tacos, of course. So questions about plating, presentation, which I'll review when I physically go to do the caramel apple plate here. Okay, so I'm actually gonna kind of shift gears here. So stop share, pause on the share. Which I usually just stop share, pause share is a little different. Screen sharing is pause. Am I back? Because I'm still looking at the, am I, no, all right, just stop share, I'll share again. There we go, we're back, okay. That I have confidence with. So we're gonna do a simple caramel or caramel, same thing. All right, I'll show you. We're making this stuff. Live TV, we're making this stuff. This is the expensive bottle from the grocery store, right? It's like $5 instead of $2.50. But there's even still sodium bicarbonate caramel color. So let's caramelize the sugar and then throw fake color at it. Natural flavors, which could be anything. If you've ever read the ingredients on your cosmetics. Corn syrup, that's fine. Invert sugar, which is just another version of corn syrup. And that's about it. There's a whole nother paragraph on the brand that starts with the letter H. So when we make caramel or caramel, this is it. Cream, sugar, and butter. That's caramel. It looks like cream, sugar, and butter right now, but that's all it is. Vanilla, if you want to count the flavoring, but that doesn't count. Make your base, flavor your base. That's it, using some science. So here we go. Here we go. We're gonna need, I'm gonna slide this forward and check the framing here on my saucepan. Perfect. Yep, perfect. So we're gonna do a wet caramel. Okay, that's important. Wet caramel, pretty self-explanatory. What is a wet caramel? A wet caramel has water in it. But it's not a recipe ingredient, you guys, it's a technique. What's important to know when doing a wet caramel is don't dump it. What you want is just layers. You want wet sand. It's okay if you put too much, meaning more than you actually need, because what's going to happen when this reaches 212 degrees? Water goes bye-bye. It's going to evaporate and you're left with sugar that is nice and gently heated up to 212 degrees, which is why we use wet caramel when we're going to do a caramel sauce, caramel syrup, okay, other applications other than just crank the heat, brown it, potentially burn it when we're doing a dry caramel. So there's a specific reason we use the water. Gently increase all of the sugar at once. When we do a dry caramel, where you just throw the sugar in the pan and then kind of stir it to where it gets brown and you're done, you're not adding any other ingredients, the bottom layer caramelizes really dark brown first, and then you have all the white powdery on top, the granulated layer. We typically only use that if we're going to make, say, baskets, if we're going to make sponge sugar. We're not going to add any other ingredients to it. We just want to use that caramelized sugar. And so we don't really need to worry about being gentle with it. So 2 layers, you want the white layer, and then you want the layer of water. Another analogy I like to give students is this is just like a recipe when you're boiling eggs or doing potatoes. What do they say? Cover with water. That's all we're doing. We're covering the sugar with water. Then turn on your heat and crank it. You want this to go fast, or else you're going to be standing there staring at your pot for 15 minutes. I have some water in reserve, and that's on purpose. If you do want to measure it out, it is going to change based on the size of your pot. I usually end up using about somewhere between 1/4 and 1/3 of a cup of water for this cover with water step. But you want some in reserve. So that's why I don't bother measuring it out, to be completely honest. So here's why you want some in reserve. You want to go back, go in here, and let me check my, yeah, so we'll do it from this side on the camera. Just press against the side. I'm using a pastry brush because this is the best delivery vehicle to get water from here into here. That's all we're doing. You get the wet pastry brush and you tap the sides to rinse down any crystals that may have formed on the side. This is why you don't dump the water in. You don't want to splatter crystals on the sides. There are many, different techniques to do many different things. This is one you really can't deviate from. Or else in 10 minutes, when you go to turn this into a caramel, wham, Jolly Rancher. You get little crystals everywhere. We don't want to do that. We want smooth, not gritty, not sandy mouthfeel. How do we do that? We make sure we don't have any crystals left behind. Also, I'm not going to stir this. Do you see a spoon anywhere? You might think I just forgot to set it up. But we're not going to spoon. We're not going to stir anything. It's actually just right here. But we don't stir it. You leave that alone. If you need to go do something else, go do something else. Don't touch that. Okay. Now, once it changes color, do not leave. Like seriously here, to be completely honest. If you have sugar boiling, you shouldn't leave the kitchen, just general safety advice. But definitely once it changes color, don't leave. You've got about 1 minute to 1.5 minutes to go through all the darkness stages of caramel to get to burnt. And burnt is bad. There's nothing you can do about it. You got to start over. So, couple different stages. What's going to happen? Of course, all the sugar is going to dissolve. And it's going to do nothing for like around 5 minutes, to be completely honest. Then you might actually notice it kind of turns slightly super light pale yellow, and then do nothing. Ignore that. When it browns, it's obvious, and it's going to brown along the edges first. It's not going to brown dead center. It's going to brown around the edges first. When that happens, that's when that timer in your head, minute to 1.5 minutes, 60 to 90 seconds. You got to know you're going to be doing your other ingredients. You're going to be taking it off the heat. Okay. This happens fast. It will happen slower the lower your heat, but then the longer it's going to take. So you got to balance. You want to make sure you still have water in reserve because you're going to keep an eye on the sides. Again, some sugar might get splattered when the bubbles pop. And that's going to be a slightly lower temperature, so then it's going to crystallize again. So you have to go back and give it a good rinse. Now, don't picture painting. All we're doing is moving water from here to here. Okay, you're pressing the sides. I like the bristled pastry brushes for this. Silicone ones are fine, but the bristled ones hold a lot more water. Just personal advice reference there. You don't want to go dipping that in the sugar and water, because then you got to try to clean the bristles that have crystal sugar, and it's a bad idea. You don't want to do that. So If that's the case, just go back to the store and buy a 3-pack for $8 because it's toast if it gets full of sugar for the most part. Okay. Notice I didn't aggravate or agitate or do anything to the mixture in the pot. Hands off. We're just rinsing down. If you want to go kind of next level science, what we're dealing with here is liquids and solids. What happens if we have any solids left behind? They're going to slam into the liquid molecules, instantly lowering their temperature, which then causes them to crystallize, turn back into a solid. Then you have a cascading effect. Wham, Jolly Rancher. Okay. It's not that bad. The whole thing doesn't seize into one brick of Jolly Rancher, but that's part of my technique actually with younger people, is I try to reference whatever they think they might be able to relate to, and then kind of knowing your audience a little bit. Like I don't give them the Beth has VD mnemonic, for example, for the freshmen in high school. But adults, different story, especially if you've built a rapport with your audience and you know what you can or can't get away with. If your bosses tend to say, yeah, we're not going to say that, then the right way, the wrong way, and what the bosses say. That's how we keep our jobs. So that's really totally up to you. You don't want to, maybe hopefully my attitude and delivery can maybe inspire you a little bit, but you don't want to be the next me. You need to be the first you. And I got nothing else right now on that point and subject. We'll come up with more things a little bit later here. I want to make sure I don't burn this because I am missing a step here real quick. Cream, remember we're dealing with water and sugar, or solids and liquids, right? All right, solids and liquids, the differences between those, if we're talking about the same product, is temperature. So where does cream live? Cream lives in the refrigerator. It's cold. So I want to increase the temperature of my cream. I don't want to boil it. I don't want to scald it. We do some other sciencey stuff when we do that. I just want to make it warmer. Easiest way to do that is hand it to Chef Mike. True story. We call the microwave Chef Mike. 30 seconds. Now the reference recipe here, ladies, is I have a little bit more than 3/4 of a cup of cream and a cup of sugar. So for a good consistency for a caramel apple, it's a cup of sugar, 3/4 of a cup of cream, tablespoon of butter. When I'm memorizing recipes, I like to go from the biggest to the smallest. That's just a way my weird brain works. But cup of sugar, 3/4 cup of cream, tablespoon of butter. So take your tablespoon of butter and put it in the cream, because we want to warm up the butter too. Why? Because a lot of times butter lives in the fridge. I always have a stick of butter out on the counter because I don't use margarine in my house. All right, color change has already happened. I know I'm about 60 seconds away. So quick review. Oh, by the way, it's way too late to brush down the sides. I mean, all the water is gone. Visually, you can tell because the bubbles are slower and they're more uniform in size for the most part. More bubbles that are similar in size. Water is a lot more violent when the water is boiling. You don't have to use a candy thermometer here. You don't, unless you were looking to specifically recreate a product at a specific temperature. That's when you would want to use a thermometer. But we're skipping all of those sugar stages. We're going right to the end, which is caramelization, caramelize. So caramel, caramel, same thing, not caramels, plural, or caramels, plural. That's the squishy little candy. And that's a totally different process. That requires evaporated milk, or sweetened condensed milk, cornstarch. All right, when I get the first wisp of smoke, heat off, dump. That's what you want to have happen. If that doesn't happen, you really screwed something up. Yes, I'm being dramatic. True story though. Let it calm down before you start stirring it. There's a bunch of different kind of arguable techniques here. Me, I like to hedge my bets. I don't want any crystallization, any of that, because it's agitating right now, right? So if all the water boiled out, why did it volcano and boil? What do you think? Don't overthink it. Did I just add something to the pot? So that must be where the water came from. The water I just added is the water content in the butter and the cream. So that's the explanation as to why it goes nuts, is the butter and the cream. The water and the butter and the cream needs to get out of there, because that's really violent. We want that to kind of calm down. Then I can slowly, with the silicone spatula, not a rubber one, okay, use a rubber one, it's going to disappear pretty quick. Silicone spatula or wood is fine. I like to scrape the bottom slowly. I'm not stirring. Two things I'm doing here. I'm letting out trapped water under the top layer. I'm also making my life in the dish pit a little easier by scraping the bottom when it comes to doing the dishes. And I'm slowly helping this mix. But look, we're bubbling crazy again. That's because I released that water. Once the bubbles relax, that's when I'm going to really start to mix and stir, which if done correctly, you shouldn't have to stir that much because of the natural convection process from all the volcanic bubbling and stuff. It kind of mixes itself, to be honest. All right, so the crazy bubbles, the violent bubbling has stopped. There is still some water content in here. It didn't all boil out. It just finally got below the boiling point. Okay, that's why it stopped being violently boiling, because it's not 212 degrees anymore. For us in Denver, it's about 208. Sea level's 212 or 100 Celsius, because he used water for his temperature scale. 0 is freezing, 100 is boiling. Bob's your uncle. I really have an Uncle Robert too, by the way, so I know that's so corny, dad joke, makes no sense, but it's true. Now that I think about it, my ex-father-in-law's named Robert too. I can't get away from him. So look at that. One of my favorite parts of this demo, you guys, still to this day, is this step right here, especially when I don't have the close-up camera and the students, nobody can see, because they saw you put in butter, sugar, and cream, white, white, yellow. Right, you should see you guys are making all these awesome faces. You should see the face my wife is making, because she can smell it. I know, right? Torture. Get this under the water as quickly as possible if you have that availability. Okay, we don't need this anymore. So review with your audience here. If it's virtual, you want to try to keep looking at the camera as much as possible. You will get used to it. You will get used to it. It's weird. You will get used to it. When you're confident in your verbiage as well, the nervousness should go away. When you're comfortable screwing things up, the nervous goes away. When you accept that that's just the way it is, that things are going to happen, especially when you're live going one take. Okay, we didn't train at Juilliard. You know what I mean? Maybe some of you are or did, cool, or we're not in a improv troupe, okay? we may be comfortable in front of classes to begin with, but a camera completely different. It really can be. So, but trust in yourself. Also, trust in finding a way to put your audience at ease and fostering this sort of interaction. It is rare that nobody interacts. There's almost always at least one that will chat, usually. Okay. You know, not everybody has their camera on here. We get a handful that are comfortable with that. That's also completely fine, especially in the work from home world in a lot of cases, you know. So a lot of the social dynamic has changed as well in terms of what is acceptable behavior within a professional interaction, if you will, because work from home, not from home. So that's a whole new world in and of itself, not just the fact that you're on a camera. I mean, we've been, you know, ever since Julia Child, this has been done on TV. So, so really, I can't stress this enough. You have to find something that to put your own experience in. So maybe for me, it's comedy. For me, it's self-deprecation. It doesn't have to be for you, whatever that might be. But, and part of the self-deprecation is acceptance that things just kind of go awry. But then my brain just flips into the comedy side and we all like to have fun and have a nice day. So, but it doesn't have to be. Whatever that is that makes you, you. Your personal experience, whether you're with kids, it'll be your personal experience as a parent. If you're with adults, it could also be your personal experience as a parent, but from a slightly different perspective in sharing your own. I was cooking with my kid. Now you're relating as a parent. You're at the library, so you're not their everyday teacher, but you're still an adult. So there's a little bit different aspect. Maybe you can be the cool aunt or uncle, even though you're still an adult figure, you're not their parent, right? So it's when doing a train the trainer sort of interaction we're doing here, I have to come up with ways to describe things that might just be natural feelings, sort of in like a step-by-step, where for you guys, it could just be as simple as you make a quick correlation when you're in front of someone. That's your example. That would be your experience. So it may or may not work verbatim word for word of what I'm describing to you, but I trust, because you're already doing what you do now, I trust you will be able to recognize those incidents, for lack of a better word, when they come up, those opportunities for building rapport. Oh, we're there already? Man, it's going to be recorded. It is recorded. So I always do that. I put the spatula in the sink when you need it. Now is when you would want your vanilla to go in, your cognac, your whiskey, your rum, your salt, your espresso, okay, your spice. Okay, sweet and spicy play real well together. Aha, that's right. Okay, whatever you might want. Okay. If you want to be like me, get whiskey finished in cognac barrels. Okay. Love it. But that's when you would you could put, okay, what else works with caramel? Maybe some chocolate. So maybe a chocolate liqueur would work. Okay, and it doesn't have to be booze either. So, okay, who do I kid? We're gonna put the booze in there. But if it doesn't have to be an alcohol, it could be an extract easily. Okay, mint, possibly. Go real light on the mint though, if you're gonna. I would recommend against it. But nuts work real well. Okay, some nut extract, almond extract. Okay, could go here. Coconut would also play potentially. For those kinds of things, the internet, quite frankly, most of the time somebody has tried the idea you have and they'll tell you if they screwed up or not, right? So do some reading, do a little research, or just try it yourself. Go for it. Okay, all you need to remember is the smoke alarm is not a timer. So this is going to thicken as it rests because it's still sugar, butter, cream. So the butter is really going to drive that viscosity. If you want it to be a shelf-stable syrup, I say shelf-stable, I don't mean in terms of safety, but one that'll always be a syrup, corn syrup or agave nectar. Or you can also play with your ratio of sugar to cream. The more cream, the thinner it will be. So now, knife cuts on our apple. You can use the old apple slicer you got at the grocery store if you want. Nothing wrong with that if you want apple wedges. If you want anything other than an apple wedge, you got to fabricate the apple properly. So that slicer, right, that's round, got the handles on both sides, you push down and you're done. You got apple wedges and a little round core in the middle. No versatility there. So we cut up an apple the same way we'll do a pepper. We're going to cut around the core. Pinch grip, claw. I like to kind of stick my finger right smack in where the stem is, okay? And come out to about the crest of the arch, give or take. That's a good rule of thumb. And cut straight down and forward, okay? Now, you can turn the apple if you want to go all the way around. Why? It rolls all over the place. Remember, stories, safety? Take the flat side of the apple and put the flat side on the board. Okay? Fingertips, knuckle, and you gauge off of here and where you're looking. You do, if you have a choice, you want to buy a nice vertical apple, not one that's kind of all dodgy. You want to get one that's nice and vertical, straight up and down. And you're just down and forward. Turn your apple down and forward. Try to stay parallel to the other side. We're cutting around the core. If you nailed it, you want a square at the end. So that maximizes your yield, what we call. So minimizing waste. Don't give this to the dog, okay? They need to eat like 200 apple seeds. That's bad, but potential cyanide poisoning with apple seeds. Compost, trash, okay, whatever. Now look at all this versatility, you guys. I can do whatever I want with all these apples. Now we're right back to knife cut. Sorry, the world revolves around our knife cuts. Okay, so let's say I want to use diced up apples for a stuffing, like in pork chops. So we cut our flat. Okay, our plank is what we call this. Fingertips hold the food, knuckle guides the knife. However wide my plank is, I pull back. I cut the same width, and we get what we call bâtonnets or juliennes, or the kids call them apple fries. Okay? Cutting the same width, right? We're right back there again, you guys. One finger holds the food if you do this technique properly. I go down just a little bit to set my distance, pull straight back. Let's say you want to do those diced apples for your stuffing of your pork chop. So however wide, go the same width. We get three-dimensional squares called cubes, cubed up apples. This would be a small dice, technically, 1/4-inch cubes. Okay. Let's say we want, I don't know, you still want your wedges. There's your apple wedges that you get with that slicer. Okay. If you want slices, I do a slice. The finger, the knuckle is what determines how thin or thick these are. Also notice I'm exaggerating this, but I sweep out and around and come back. I've jabbed my hand too many times. Okay, so I sweep it out to catch that knuckle. Wicked sharp knife. And you get sliced apples. Take the kids back to McDonald's. Sliced apple slices. Okay, or a nice, gorgeous looking fan thingy here. Okay, all that is a sharp knife and not moving this hand. Trust this hand, holds everything there, and that's all I'm doing all day. You can go super slow if you want. There's nothing wrong with that. Set your distance and then pull back. This hand doesn't move. Pinch grip is your friend. Trusting your whole body. Let's say you want to do a fruit salad real quick, and then we'll kind of wrap this up. You do a fruit salad, so we're just going to do bigger planks, and then a bigger. Medium dice. Good for fruit salad. The technique for using your knife doesn't change. Cut your plank, cut the strips, turn them 90 degrees because math, and cut your squares, which in this case will be a cube. And whether it is a potato, whether it's an apple, whether it's an, okay, onions are a little different, but it's still cut the long ways, turn them, cut the cross cut. That's why technique is your friend. It's just about exposure to technique and then practicing certain techniques. That's all, and then the execution of those techniques. That's the difference between the home cook being satisfied at a 6, 7, or 8 and the professional shooting for and executing a 9 or a 10 every single time. So it's just an accumulation of technique, no different than what you ladies and gentlemen do for a living. Everything you do is a technique, which I have not been exposed to, nor do I have not been exposed to. I don't know the first thing, really, right? It's just a technique. That's all. It's that simple. So how do we plate? Last but not least, first we start with a plate, right? I know, funny. Dishes are clean. Negative space. We work with this. So we have our caramel or caramel, still a caramel apple. Now, we could put this in a squirt bottle, but the technique for plating is the same whether I'm in the dessert shop or I'm in the savory kitchen. So if we're doing a reduced sauce or something like that in the savory side, a pan sauce, you don't have time, nor would you want to with a super wicked hot sauce to put it in a squirt bottle. You use a spoon. So how do we do this? How do we do dots? I'll show you. You get your product on your spoon, you wipe it off, so you're in control of what goes where. I use 2 hands, you guys, because coffee. Let it fall off the spoon and then flatten it. And gravity will be your friend. And you keep that stream in the middle to keep it nice and round. Bigger one, let it fall off faster. Now the thickness of your syrup, your sauce, your caramel will determine its flow rate. Or in other words, how easily and smoothly it falls off, it comes off the spoon. Odd numbers. Excuse me. The human eye prefers odd numbers, visually speaking. Not a lot of even numbers in nature. We'll just use caramel. So that's how you do a dot. A drizzle, you just don't flatten the spoon. Thing about a drizzle is don't use your wrist. You use your whole arm. You don't want to go flinging it everywhere. Okay. let's start to build this plate. We always want a height element. And typically what I like to do is just take one of these big guys, cut the bottom off, and there you go. Height, oh, you can't see it. Height element. It'll just stand up. So let's stick this guy right here. Why not? Take our little stack of sliced apple here. Height, negative space, lines, angles, shadows, shapes. Primarily height, negative. I got the super thin one that's in the way. I don't want that there. Okay, there we go. Height, angles, lines, shadows, shapes. Now, I don't know if I'm going to like this or not, you guys. I haven't done this exact design ever before. All I'm doing is just following the rules, the guidelines. So we'll see what I like, what I don't like. So we've got, let's stick this right here. Also, notice I didn't put a prime element, my height element, smack in the middle of the plate. We're not making the Target logo here, not making a dartboard. You'll see this a lot out there, especially on TV. Put the food in the middle, nice, even, and symmetrical, have a nice day. No, you don't get that visual impact, at least in my opinion. Let's take the old, oh, we have our apple fries. We can do something like this maybe. What else do we have? Oh, we got these little guys. Shapes, angles, lines, color, height, texture. I have color contrast because of the peel here. Odd number. I want another apple fry here because I have an even number of 2 right there. So I want a third element. There's 2 reasons we do odd numbers. 1 is the art, 2 is business. So a fun joke for the kids, at least high school kids, is let's say you're out on a date. If you haven't been on a date yet, good luck. That's what I tell them. Who gets the last chicken wing? Usually the boys will say, I do. And then I say, good luck getting a second date. But the point is we want them to ask, we want guests to fight over the last one. This is why most appetizers are plated in odd numbers. We want you to argue with your date, your sister, your brother's cousin, or whoever, and parents or whomever to just get fed up and say, fine, I'll order another one, you can have your own. Cornell University says that works about 18% of the time. They actually did a study. I learned about when I was in culinary school. I went, no, really? Yeah, and looked it up. So there's a business side, but primarily there's the artistic side of things. So we have that, super simple. Over here, I have some things to play with. I got some pecans. These are pecans, not pecans, like y'all might say down there in South Carolina. My wife's from Florida, North Florida, and we argue about this all the time. If you're gonna make a pie, maybe you can call them pecans. I'll be honest. A pecan is in my pantry. It says Green Giant. Okay. I'm from Seattle originally, so it's the same thing. Okay, so a little pecan here with some whipped cream. Yes, we make this from scratch usually, but for demo, give me a break, Safeway. Okay, maybe some pecans here. I've got some chocolate chips, also good for a color contrast. Whoops, I forgot to put the caramel on. I'm getting ahead of myself. So, oh, the spoon fell in there. Yeah, you don't want that to happen. It's a caramel apple, so let's let some caramel drizzle onto our apple. I'm trying to keep my lines and my negative space here. This also is going to act as some glue for any other item I might want to put on here. There we go. It'll hold the chocolate chips now. And last but not least, we'll do some powdered sugar. Don't go shaking it everywhere, or Emerald, he makes a little more money than I do, but he's like, bam, all this. Stay in control right here and just tap it. All right, so if you got a fan blowing away, you got to get in the way. The harder you smack it, the more it's going to snow, but you want to be in control of where this goes. Angles, lines, shadow, shape, height, color, contrasting colors, complementary colors, depth, use of odd numbers, the rule of thirds. These are design fundamentals that any art class we might cover, how to properly frame a subject. Okay. But all that is a caramel apple. Oh, thank you, Jennifer. All that is. So there's actually content creators on Instagram, I keep forgetting who they are, that are using like Fruit Loops and Spam to make elegant, chefy foo-foo plates. Why? Because I don't care about the ingredients when I'm thinking of a visual. It's just a medium. Bob Ross used oil paint. We use food. It's just a medium. Arguably more difficult, there's more options and variety than just what are in the tubes of paint. Yes, there's 256 colors and all, whatever you get at Michael's or wherever, but or Hobby Lobby or Fred or Walmart, whatever. But when you're designing a visual to the guest, they're just visuals. It's just a medium. Height, negative space. So let's take a quick peek back. Couple of those, I got a couple slides that talk about how do we do, what do we do in the time of Corona, and then we'll wrap it up. Well, our life went virtual. School went virtual, then it went in person, then it went virtual again, and then it went back in person, then it went virtual again, depending on your district or right, or your state legislature, or fill in the blank. Okay, the takeaway, I think, you guys, is we lost our control of things that we were used to being in control of. Huge reset. Now, in terms of our professional atmosphere, in terms of just doing a cooking demo, okay, where do we get that control back? And that's where you can be the mentor. That's where you can be the, you can show that confidence. Here's a kicker. You can show your confidence in your lack of confidence. It's okay to tell them it's your first time. There's nothing wrong with that. If you're not worried about it, they won't be worried about it. And then it's a group, it's a team atmosphere. We're going to get through this together, right? But you still have the innate ability to do what you're doing. You do have a little more knowledge. They are there to learn from you. Even if you have to use reference cards, you've got the cards, they don't. Okay, whatever that level of confidence is. In remote, we taught under a philosophy of learn, discuss, experience. So learn, be exposed to something via lecture, via conversation, discuss it more to include that conversation, and then experience. So this is actually a design, a philosophical tenet of Escoffier, learn, discuss, experience. It kind of sounds like that, doesn't it? A little bit of that sort of official bullet point write-up of how to do something, but that that doesn't discount the value of that that bit of knowledge. But see, teaching and learning, it's a joint venture, especially in this remote world. Students and teachers on that first day was the first day for all of them. So maybe rest your hat on that. With students, it's state your expectations early and clearly. That way there's no confusion. Okay. Always safety. Safety first. If they're just going to watch and you're going to do caramel or something with hot liquids and whatnot, you don't necessarily have to say everybody stay 6 foot away, but maybe you set up your station to where it's uninviting for someone to just randomly get up and walk up in front, and now they're in an unsafe situation. So that's a technique, if you will. So think through that. If you're with lab, okay, go over safety before you go over how to hold a knife. Just go over general safety. Okay, don't ever catch a falling knife. Those of you that saw me last week, don't ever. Okay, those kinds of things that need to be mentioned until they're second nature. So you're going to show first, then do. So you show them, then you let them do. That's classic culinary instruction. Show first, then do. And when it's time for them to do, be out there with them. And I've said this 1,000 times, okay, maybe like 30, be yourself. Okay, I put a little question mark there, right? Stories. That's a potential another technique. Dropping a little teaser. I make a comment about dangerous, something with the knife, and I got stories. I don't say a word. Now I hooked them. Now they want to know, is he going to tell the story? Then when I tell the story, 2/3 of the class didn't want to hear the story about me cutting the tip of my thumb off. Okay, that's again my technique, but that's a potential trick, is a teaser. Okay, and that's basic marketing right there. Your pre-planning, your prep, if it's going to be remote, things here, and I don't want to read them specifically, death by PowerPoint, word for word here, but again, expectations clearly. Be prepared. There's only so much you can get away with that when you go from nervousness versus, wow, this person's just not prepared. It's one thing to have all these slides and everything you're comfortable with, or that you're prepared, but you're nervous about delivering that. That's different than just not being prepared. So that's key. Okay, and then especially if money is changing hands for your services. You want to make sure you're very, very much prepared, and open up your availability a little bit after. Could be, the meeting after the meeting, the Q&A session after. You decide what that's going to look like. Either be okay with extending the time, or hey, I've got to go. You can reach me for the next day or two or whatever. You can manage that. But you need to make that expectation stated clearly and early. Okay, you don't want to, this is not selfish, this is just professional. You don't want to be on the hook for 3 months later, unless that is part of what's expected. Or maybe you have a small group and you don't mind. But if you're giving a seminar to 300 people, do you necessarily potentially want, no, there's a window to get a hold of me, and then otherwise I have an outlet for, communication, so to speak. You guys, this small group, you get a hold of me, I don't care. If you're doing a full-on class, so we do personal and customized feedback. So videos are sent to us from our students, the instructors, I should say, and then they record a personal feedback to them. And you decide whether you want to have that level of engagement or not. But these are just some techniques about how to really have a quality curriculum or an event remotely. Do what you say. I got that when I was 15 years old from a Bayliner boat salesman worth a couple $1 million that I knew growing up. He said, the key to being a successful business is do what you say. If you say you're going to do it, do it. I'm like, wow, that's it. I learned it's a little harder than that, but do what you say you're going to do. Be yourself. Look, I put it there again. And then some ideas on adults versus kids. They both share with them. You guys ever heard of that before? As an acronym? Some base sales training stuff here, you guys. That's okay. I didn't mean that as an insult. With them means what's in it for me. That is base human psychology. A good reference there is to go back and read Dale Carnegie's How to Win Friends and Influence People. How do I get them to want to do it and then potentially think it was their idea? Okay, so you have to find that in your audience. What's in it for me? Is it entertainment? Is it education? Is it knowledge? Is it all of the above? Is it to steal a recipe? Is it whatever it is? Once you figure that out, you'll have an easier time. Adults, watch your volume. It might need to be different than if you're with teens and kids. And it quite literally could need to be quieter or louder, depending on, you know, do you need to talk over folks? How much chatter would you allow crosstalk? As long as it's applicable to the subject, doesn't bother me whatsoever. But if I notice the crosstalkers are not paying attention at all, I have no hesitation to call them out in front of their friends. And selfishly, that's fun. Ask any teacher. A classroom teacher, right? They're like, yes, that's fun. We're not going to tell the students it's fun, but it's fun sometimes. Okay. I love this phrase. I will take credit for this. I'm proud of this. Find common ground, but don't assume it's a shared experience. Don't assume you have shared experience. I have an issue with that actually sometimes, is why I like saying that. You can easily, especially when you're in the attitude like I have, you can cross the line sometimes where you lose what's known as understood as professionalism and get a little too cordial. So try to maintain those boundaries as much as possible. Wow, sorry. Teens generally will need, not always, but generally will need a firmer hand and more mentorship as opposed to leadership. The pace has to be faster almost always with teens and young adults, and because of that shorter attention span. Okay, their world is 120 characters long. Chef Steve, that's me. There's my phone number. I don't have, so personal begging here, if you will. I don't have a work phone, you guys, but I'm on a cheap unlimited, so it's no big deal. That is my personal number. I made good money in mileage, so I wasn't going to bother trying to figure out what minutes were work versus, versus personal. So let's see. Unless you're in my contacts in my phone, you go to voicemail. Sorry, that's the way it is. But I will respond in 24 hours if you leave me a voicemail. I do prefer email on the work side, but that number's there for you just in case. But I do humbly request an email first. I love pictures. If you guys want my input on something you've done, an idea you've had, shoot me an email. I'll get back to you in 24 hours, guaranteed. I just hosed myself there when I say guaranteed, huh? Guaranteed, I'll get back to you in 24 hours. Stop, share. One last thing. I'm gonna take my mobile. I want to show you guys my setup. So it's nice. I'm lucky that I have a corner kitchen. It photographs great at home, and that I have this island. This is one thing that we specifically looked for actually when we were looking. So unplug the phone, cords. All right. So we have. Oh geez. Okay, there we go. Sorry guys. I wasn't planning on this, so it is just kind of is what it is. All right, there we go. So I got Amazon tripods. I have two of them. My cell phone is here on the exact same tripod. Okay, Amazon Basics. It was like two of them for 30 bucks, I think. Regular house lighting. I'm lucky that it actually works. My lighting does work. If not, there is really, really cheap LED tripod video lighting out there, also on internet retail providers. I have my laptop. I have this camera, which honestly is just my daughter's YouTube camera. to be completely honest. It's 4K, but that camera is plugged in as an external camera on my laptop. And then my cell phone is the close-up. And on the underside here, okay, there's the rest of my house, at least my front room. Selfie mode. So I have this guy. Okay, this is gonna probably make everybody sick. So let's turn the camera off on this view. Stop video. Okay. So this guy here, this comes out from the tripod, just like tripods for years and years and years have this mount, but these cell phone holders. So just do cell phone tripod mount in your search, and they'll come up if this is something that you would want to do or use. And they just screw onto that standard camera size screw. So, let me reference. There we go. Okay. So I didn't know if I was in frame shot or not, but it just screws into the base there. I have one of the tiny countertop tripods. I don't like them because you can't get high enough for a close-up. That's why I have this full size, not extended. You can't, I mean, those, they only go about this high, and then they're in the shot, the head, the main shot. So depending on the software, whether it's Google or WebEx or Cisco or Microsoft Teams or Zoom, the framing actually ends up being a little different. Some have your ability to change home ratio, HD, 16:9. Some are just like teens. You're just stuck with whatever you have. So that lends credence to that be prepared part. Oh, sweet. Multiple cell phones and tripods. Okay, yep, nice, nice. Let's see, what else? Questions? Whew. That's it. We did it.
All right. So I'm going to stop the recording.